What's going on there, folks? What's happening there? It's part three of Bootlickers Anonymous. It's not so anonymous. You guys expose yourself all the time. Bootlicker Bingo, part 3. And I left off right here. Officer used minimum necessary force. And I was talking about pulling the trigger finger. I don't know what condition that is. I left off right here. These guys got trigger finger. There's a name for it. There's a name for that when your trigger finger just keeps firing unnecessarily. You see that in the movies with a revolver. Click, they fire off 5 or 6 rounds and then click, 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 click. Now that happens to the human brain when they are under a high stress situation, like police officers. They are under a high stress situation because they've been trained to. They've been trained to believe that any shadow, including their own, any dark object like a phone or a flashlight, maybe a pack of cigarettes, maybe one cigarette in the case of Eric Garner, is a threat to their life. And they continue to just fire and fire and fire and fire. They keep firing. There's a name for that. The human mind, the human brain actually does that. You'll fire several rounds. You'll keep pulling that trigger even though the gun's not firing anymore. It's out of ammo. And I forget the name of that. Please leave a comment below and tell me what the name of that condition is. And that's under high stress situations. And civilians and cops do that. I mean, if a homeowner fires their gun empty, if they're under a high enough stress situation and they're not trained very well, they'll just keep shooting, keep pulling that trigger with nothing happening. A well-trained person, not a cop, a well-trained firearms individual will reload that gun in an efficient manner. Minimum force necessary. That's a bunch of shit. Bunch of shit. If there's 5 or 6 officers on scene pointing their guns at some so-called suspect. Oh yeah, here's where I left off. Pay attention. If there's 5 or 6 officers on scene, or more than that, whatever, a bunch of officers on scene firing or pointing their guns at a suspect, and one officer fires, here's why. One officer not here's why they fired, but here's why every officer fires. One officer hears a gunshot, and they all fire. The rest of them fire. Do you know why the rest of them fire? Not because they saw danger, but the rest of them fire their guns so they won't be asked later why they didn't fire their gun when their fellow officer did. That's why they... Yep. That's why they do that. That's why there's a car or an innocent person shot up with 144 bullets or whatever it is. How many bullets can you fire into a vehicle or into a person? That's why after one cop shoots unnecessarily, they all have to shoot to back that other guy up. So they don't get questioned in court. Well, why didn't you fire your gun? So they don't have to reveal that there was no threat. That's why they do that. Let's move forward, folks. Minimum force necessary. Minimum necessary force. That's a bunch of bullshit. Anyway, kids should be taught to respect authority. That's another... I want to vomit at that one. Respect is earned. It's not simply given out. It's not simply a virtue simply because you have an article of clothing on. Respect authority. Authority over whom? False authority? You have no authority over me. You have no authority over my life. You have no authority over my child's life. Kids should be taught to respect authority. And I was. Officer Friendly in 1st grade came to visit. Maybe 1st or 2nd grade. Officer Friendly. We didn't even know the guy's real name. He wasn't introduced as Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones, or he was introduced as Officer Friendly. I remember this specifically. How much does that belt weigh? And he said 40 pounds. I remember that. He said 40 pounds, that belt. And I don't know what other questions were asked, but Officer Friendly came to visit us in first grade. First grade? Second grade. First or second grade. It was very... I remember the classroom, and I remember across the hall was first grade. Across the hall was first grade. I was in second grade. Yes, that's right. Miss Grafer. Miss Grafer was first grade, and Miss Wynn was second grade. I had Miss Wynn. So, Officer Friendly came to visit us and propagandized us that we should be taught to respect authority. No, that's completely false. I was taught to respect authority, but you know why you teach kids to respect authority? You know that movie, The Bronx Tale? With Chaz Palminteri and that kid that got all fucked up on drugs later on in life. Chaz Palminteri, A Bronx Tale. Oh, and Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro's son was saying, yeah, but Daddy, they love him. They respect him. No, they don't respect him. You know what they do? Where are we at? We don't respect the police. We fear them. We fear them. Kids should be taught to fear the police. This is spelled wrong. It's spelled F-E-A-R. Kids should be taught to fear authority. I was taught to respect authority, but I ended up deep down in my heart, even as a child, I knew I was scared shitless of them because they have the right. Not the right. They don't have the right, but they have the power to ruin your life and even end your life for no reason. Kids should be taught to fear authority. That is an absolute bullshit line right there. And I'll tell anybody that. If you think that, man, check yourself again. You're kidding yourself. Comply first and fight it out in court. That never works. The cops are working for the courts. The courts are working for the cops. They're on the same fucking team. And same thing with the prosecutor and your public defender. They are all being paid by the same entity. Comply. When does that ever work? If you don't know what you're doing, and I emphasize this, if you don't know what you're doing, have you ever taken a traffic ticket to court? Most of the time you lose. I mean, you might get it reduced, but most of the time you lose. I've taken several traffic tickets to court and gotten them dismissed after I read the traffic law, the traffic codes. And that's a federal thing too. Every state, all 50 states, have to comply and obey with a federal traffic code. So I got that book. It's about the size of Atlas Shrugged, but it's twice as wide and twice as tall. Yeah, it's about 1,000 pages long, but it's huge and heavy. The uniform... What is it called? Uniform Traffic Control Device Manual. And it's put out every 4 years. Changes every 4 years. So I got that book. I learned about the traffic codes, brought it to court, got my case dismissed. And I wouldn't even call it a technicality. I got it dismissed based on the law. And others that I've brought to court, a lot of times the officer doesn't show up. So you move for a dismissal immediately if your accuser is not present in the courtroom. So comply first, fuck that. You know, I mean, it never works in court. For me, it did with traffic. But I'm not talking about assault or resisting arrest or all this murder that and assault and battery. I don't even know. There's so many different things. There's 1,000 crimes that they do. I can't list them all. That these blue line thugs do to civilians. Comply first, only if you've committed a crime. You commit a crime, comply with the officer. Put your hand behind your back and go to jail for it and suck it up. If you haven't done anything wrong, you don't have to comply with shit. And you don't even have to show your ID. Don't show your ID. Let me see your ID. For what? Because I want to see your ID. Well, what's your crime? You continue asking questions. Don't even answer any questions. Just continue asking questions until they fucking break your face. You know, and then you can get them in court. Then they're the defendant. The officer followed procedure. The procedure needs to fucking change. I hear that every goddamn time there's a controversy on the news or in a press conference. He followed procedure. And nobody, no civilians, no nothing. When is this? They don't, the media, nothing. They don't even ask the question. Well, when the fuck is the procedure going to change to disallow that? It's fucking bullshit. Change the fucking procedure. They killed the person and the dog and the wife and the husband, but they followed procedure. Change the fucking procedure. Blue Lives Matter. This is another one. Real old. All you lives matter folks, you individual specialty groups, kiss my ass. Especially you cops. First of all, Blue Lives Murder. That's spelled wrong also. Blue Lives Murder. Not matter. They murder. So all you murderers can just go find a tall roof and jump off as soon as possible. As far as I'm concerned, okay? So pardon me. All you lives matter folks, especially agenda groups, you know what? Human lives matter. My life matters. If you don't like the police, move to Somalia. Well, I didn't move to Somalia. I moved to Mexico. I'm in Mexico, and there's a lot more freedom in Mexico. It's getting worse. Laws are changing every year, restricting people's rights in Mexico. But Mexico is decades behind the tyranny and police state and abuse and murder and blood in the streets from these cops, from these Blue ISIS terrorist MFers, than the U.S. is, or even Canada, or Australia. Australia is pretty bad too, and the U.K. Mexico's, for the most part, pretty peaceful when it comes to the cops. For the most part, you know. They still have their corruption down here and their ridiculous laws and corrupt police officers. But if the police officer is being corrupt, you have the right to resist without getting your ass kicked, without getting shot, as long as you put up a front. Not a front, but a fight. Verbally, physically, you might even be able to get physical with the cops. Push them away. Get the fuck away from me. I don't run into that kind of stuff because I'm always looking over my shoulder and I know how to stay out of it. Unfortunately, down here in Mexico, the U.S. has taught me to be paranoid motherfucker. The U.S. cops, the U.S. government, and I'm not, you know, I'm just alert. I'm not so paranoid anymore down here in Mexico, but I'm just alert. And I don't even have to talk to anybody. And actually down here, I've had interactions with police down here, and they're extremely friendly. They're helpful. You ask a cop where to get to somewhere in the U.S., they're like, what do I look like, 411 to you? What do I look like, an information booth? That's the attitude of the cops in the U.S. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Part 3 is coming to a close, and I appreciate y'all. Like and subscribe to FitzCam, and share this video. Share the trifecta, what do you call it? The trilogy. The Bootlicker video trilogy. FitzCam out. Love ya. Bye.